Hey, everybody. Welcome to Menopause Headquarters or Menopause HQ, Hot, Tired, and Hormonal, where we have real talk about hormones, hot flashes, and not giving a shit. I am Angela. I'm the founder of Menopause Headquarters. I just say Menopause HQ for short. Menopause HQ is a company that provides resources for women who are 40 and above. And just like me, we're trying to make sense of what's happening, these crazy things going on in our bodies. The Menopause HQ resources help you arm yourself with the right questions to ask your doctors and how to advocate for yourself when going to see your doctors for your doctor's visits. Now, just remember, Menopause HQ's podcast and the resources that we offer are for educational purposes and informational purposes only. And it's not intended to provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your own healthcare provider regarding your personal health. I have to say that every time. Okay. Now, this is a new podcast, and we're really excited to bring this information to all of you out there who have questions about what the heck is going on with your body during perimenopause and postmenopause. This is episode 2. We have only one episode before this, and this is episode 2. It's called Perimenopause, the hot mess before the main event. And for us, the main event is menopause. So today, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you my shirt I'm wearing today, the 7 dwarfs of menopause. We got itchy, bitchy, sweaty, sleepy, bloated, forgetful, and psycho. And really, I think this shirt, I might have to make another one that says the 7 dwarfs of perimenopause, because these are really the symptoms of perimenopause and some postmenopausal symptoms as well. But we're going to talk about the years-long process of perimenopause. Our first episode explained all about your reproductive system from birth through puberty. And if you missed it, you should go back and watch it, because if you really understand what your body's doing from the time you're born reproductively and all the way through puberty, then by the time you get to perimenopause, it helps you understand the changes that you're going through better. All right. So now, if you are somebody and you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, why do I feel like a stranger in my own body? Trust me, I understand how that feels. I have been there. You are not crazy. You are not weak. And you are definitely not alone. We want you to understand that. There are a lot of women going through this and suffering, and they feel alone, even though logically they probably know they're not alone. You are not alone. And I know some of you are exhausted, but you still can't sleep, or you might be irritated by things that never used to bother you before. You might be emotional for no reason, crying one minute, laughing in the other minute. And a lot of us feel like our patience has just completely disappeared. I know mine has. This conversation is definitely for you. And I'm excited for you to hear about why your body is going through some of the things that it's going through. Now, for me, menopause totally caught me off guard, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Really more so, I think, mentally and emotionally than physically, because all I'd heard about was hot flashes and maybe some night sweats and maybe some mood swings. That's all I really knew about menopause. And it was very frustrating for me because I do have a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in public health. My background is maternal and child health, so I know what the female body is supposed to do when it comes to our cycles. And I even know some of the things about menopause. I just did not know that there were so many mental and emotional changes that come with the physical changes. Now, for me, my experience with menopause is different from a lot of women because I had a hysterectomy at 45 years old. I still have my ovaries, but my uterus is gone. And so as a result, when all of my friends were talking about, you know what, I had a period this month, I skipped 3-4 months, and then I had another period, or I had 2 periods in 1 month, or they were having all of these sporadic cycles, I didn't. So I didn't really realize that I was entering, I think I knew I was in perimenopause. I just didn't know that I was coming close to actual menopause because there was no sign, no physical sign of a lack of menses for me. It's kinda like one day I felt like myself, and then slowly but surely over time, I didn't feel like myself at all. And I think when I started having my night sweats, I didn't believe it or not, I didn't have a lot of hot flashes. I had more night sweats where I would wake up in the middle of the night and the bed would just be wet. There would be a spot on the bed that was the shape of my body. And then I would just go roll over on the other side of the bed and sleep on the cool side of the bed. I think that's when I started realizing I must be going through perimenopause. And that was years before my estrogen levels bottomed out and everything else started happening. And it's interesting because at the time, I did not have any idea I was going through mood swings. I was a single mom. I was stressed. I mean, like all of us are. So I figured I was just in a bad mood from time to time because of the stress, right? I didn't realize that that moodiness was the fluctuations of my hormones until I can look back now and I can tell that there are times that I kind of got angry at some things and blew some things out of proportion that otherwise I wouldn't have done. And it was because of the fluctuation of all the hormones. And then all of a sudden, now I know it was when my estrogen levels bottomed out, but all of a sudden I started having really high anxiety, bad depression, really bad brain fog. My body was aching all over like I was 100 years old. It felt like that. And I literally thought I was losing my mind. And the sad part about it is my doctors were telling me that my hormone levels were in the normal range. So I wasn't going through perimenopause yet. And that made me confused because I thought, well, maybe it's stress, you know? Um, I would go to Google, like a lot of us do, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to see what's perimenopause and is that what I'm going through? And I really wish I had this podcast when I was trying to figure out what was going on with me, because for those of you that have not gone through perimenopause yet or are beginning to go through perimenopause, if you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe and follow this podcast because we're going to continue every week to talk about different symptoms that you're going to be experiencing, why you're experiencing them, and some things that you can do to help yourself navigate this change of life easier. Okay. Now, there's scientific information that we're going to give you. I can't give you the scientific information. I can give you the anecdotal. I can tell you how it feels when I went through it, and but I can't give you the scientific information. And that's why I have my co-host with me, Latalia Lewis. Latalia is a nurse practitioner, and she founded a company called The Final Flow Menopause and More. Now, so Latalia, can you start us off by explaining exactly what perimenopause is?
Okay, first of all, I'm gonna go back to episode 1 and I'm gonna recap. So remember when I said that at birth, we make about 1 to 2 million eggs. So you're going to get all the eggs that you will ever have. You're not going to make new eggs when you get older, anything like that. Men continue to make sperm, but women only have the eggs that they're born with. At
Okay.
puberty, again, we have about 300,000 eggs. So every decade after that, our egg supply decreases by 10%. The reason why that is important because your eggs is what signals your ovaries to make the hormone testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. So by mid 40s, you may have like 15,000 eggs left. So if you have 15,000 eggs left, that means that your hormonal signal is weakened. So perimenopause is like a transition. It's not one moment in time. It's not menopause. It's a transition of life. So everyone will experience this. Every woman that's born with a vagina and have ovaries and uterus and
Right.
things like that, you will experience perimenopause because your hormone signals will start to weaken. And when your hormone signals start to weaken, you'll start to get array of symptoms. So think of it like this. Think of your hormones as communicators, which they are. They are your chemical text messages that communicate to your organs, to your glands. So they tell your body essentially what to do. So you can also think about it like estrogen as electricity. So think about when you're young and you have this big 3,000 square foot home and all your lights are coming on and the bulbs are bright. Everything is working well. So during perimenopause, think about the electricity starting to slow down. So each room you walk in, one room may have lights on, the next room, the light may be flickering. In some room, the light may be dark. So that's what happens during perimenopause. It's like your estrogen spikes, it surges, it crashes. So you have all these different symptoms that's going on, such as brain fog, because you have estrogen receptors everywhere in the body. When I mean everywhere, you have them in your brain, you have them in your breasts, you have them in your joints, you have them in your skin, you have them in your vessels. So you have them in every part of your body. And estrogen has at least 400 functions. So when you start to lose those signals, you start to feel those symptoms. And Angela, I want to speak to everything that you were talking about. A lot of women lose progesterone first. Progesterone is the calming hormone. So when you're starting to get anxious or irritable or moody, low estrogen causes like dopamine and serotonin to shift. So that means you can have more depression, more anxiety, and things like that because those levels are decreasing. Your signals are weakening. So
Yeah.
that's what's actually happening. And when women have hysterectomies early and they have their ovaries, a lot of women can keep their ovaries and like, oh, I'm fine. I don't go through. But the truth of the matter is, during a hysterectomy, the ovaries lose some of its blood supply. You know the
Mhm.
old saying, like, when a married couple have been married for over 50 years and then the wife passes away and then the husband passed away shortly after.
Mm, yeah.
The same thing. It's a relationship between the ovaries and the uterus. So when that is removed, the ovaries lose some of its blood supply. So it does not function as effectively long term. So you may be in perimenopausal symptoms sooner than you actually think because perimenopause can last like 8 to 10 years for a lot of women.
Does it last longer for women of color? Like, I think I read that it can start earlier, so maybe like late 30s. And I have a daughter who's turning 30 this year, and I told her, I'm like, you be on the lookout because in the next, yeah, I don't know, 10 years or so, you may start experiencing some of these symptoms, and it may come a little earlier. That's one question I have. Is it true that women of color can experience these symptoms sooner? Also, is there a correlation to how early you started your menses to how early you may experience perimenopause symptoms?
Okay, so for women of color, I'm going to repeat something I heard from Dr. Scott say that your ovaries, think of your ovaries as your paycheck and your adrenal glands as your 401k. Okay, the adrenal glands produce something called cortisol. That's a stress hormone. So, one thing about Black women, we carry stress differently. And, because of economic downturn, some of us are single mothers, some of us have multiple jobs, some of us running households, even in a husband and wife household, some of them, they're still the head of the household running things. So stress is carried differently. And so when you have a lot of stress and you already having weakening hormone signals, the adrenal glands is supposed to pick up some of those hormones, but adrenal glands, remember, their first job is to manage your stress. So they'll be like, okay, we're not going to worry about their progesterone, estrogen right now. I got to handle her stress right now. I have to get her through whatever crisis she's going through. So for Black women, we have so much stuff going on in our lives. So therefore, our symptoms can definitely be worse, and we can start perimenopause symptoms really early.
And then is there a correlation between how early you start your cycle? Some women started at 9, 10 years old. Some didn't start until 12 or 13. Is there a correlation between that and when you start perimenopause or
Mhm.
no?
Yeah, because it's the egg supply. So when you ovulate, you losing eggs. So therefore, your egg supply is diminishing earlier. So therefore, you have
Okay.
less eggs when you go through, when you start having menopause symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, you have less eggs. So the hormone signal is weaker. And think about it. They used to say that women who have kids, have multiple children, can go through menopause later because during the time that you're not ovulating, during the time that you're pregnant, you are reserving some of those eggs. So, yes, it's definitely a correlation.
My goodness. So these are all things that we were not taught. And it's so frustrating because I think we need more women in science
Mhm.
who can then take charge and study all of this and explain it to us the way we need to be explained, the way we need it to be explained, because even a lot of physicians don't understand what's going on with our bodies. Now, I wanna ask you about labs because, like I said, and this is so frustrating, it infuriates me. I've actually fired some doctors because they'll only look at the labs and they'll say, "Well, your estrogen levels are in the normal range, your progesterone, whatever, is in the normal range. So, no, you're not in perimenopause yet." And I always thought, well, it could be in the normal range, but maybe that's not normal for my body. Maybe my body is used to my estrogen being at the high normal. Now I'm at the low normal and I'm having these symptoms. Why aren't you listening to me when I'm telling you I'm having these symptoms? You're just looking at the lab work and you're saying, oh, you don't need any medication or anything. Meanwhile, I've got 15 crazy symptoms going on in my body and you're not listening to me. And it's just so angering to me. I know there are some symptoms that a lot of people talk about when it comes to perimenopause. Like, I was showing the shirt. Some of these symptoms people talk about all the time, like the hot flashes, the night sweats, the sleep problems, mood swings, brain fog, low libido.
Mhm.
I had no libido for like 2 years, but I'm single, so I was fine. There are women that I've talked to who are married or in some type of relationship, and their partners are struggling because she has no libido.
Mhm.
Weight gain is another symptom that a lot of women talk about, and women will see these symptoms and say, "Okay, something's going on," and they're thinking maybe it is perimenopause. Um, why are these the most common symptoms that women talk about or even experience?
Okay. So one thing I'm gonna talk about first, and then I'll go to that. When you talked about going into the doctor's office and then
Yeah.
they're drawing labs, it's difficult to track perimenopause because just like I said, estrogen spikes, it surges, it crashes, but has yet to disappear. So you may go to the doctor's office on a day where your hormone level is normal. That next
Okay.
day, that estrogen can spike or it can crash. So therefore, you have these ups and downs and these peaks and valleys. And when doctors are looking at numbers and not really paying attention to symptoms, that's why it's very important to track what's going on so they can
Mhm.
realize, okay, this has been consistent. And so one thing too, I'm gonna tell you another level. It's a level called the FSH. That's a follicle stimulating hormone. That's very important because that's produced by the pituitary gland. So what it does is send signals to the ovaries and say, I need you to make more eggs. And then when it keeps knocking and your ovaries are not answering because the supply of eggs have diminished and the hormone signal is weakened, that number can go up. So you have to track that trend. So during perimenopause, FSH can keep going up, keep going up, because it keep knocking and the ovaries are not answering. So that's what's actually happening. It's another level that doctors may draw called the AMH. AMH basically tells you how many eggs that you may have. Now, a lot of women are in perimenopause and doctors draw that level and say, oh, you're doing good. You have a lot of eggs. I'm not just talking about quantity eggs. I'm talking about quality eggs because quality eggs is what's going to give that hormone signal. Because when I was 39, I wanted to get pregnant again. I only have one son, but the quality of my eggs were not that great.
Mm,
My FSH was going up, so I was one of the ones that had early perimenopausal symptoms. I went into
mm.
perimenopausal symptoms around 38, 39, and I went
Wow.
into menopause at 48. So exactly around
Wow.
10 years, 9 to 10 years. So you have to realize the quality, and the quality matters based on your diet, your exercise, your nutrition, your stress. All of that matters, your lifestyle. And so you were talking about the symptoms that people can feel and touch hot flashes and night sweats. And when you have more night sweats, that's more of a progesterone. Your progesterone is low. When you have the hot flashes, because the hypothalamus in the brain is like a master regulator. So it's like right there on top of that pituitary gland. So when your estrogen levels shift, your temperature controls are off. So one day you can walk into a room cool as a cucumber. The next day you walk in that same room, you like you walked into a sauna. So so the temperature regulator is off. And so people realize those symptoms. They can feel those
That's
symptoms.
true. That's
You
true.
can't feel, I mean, you can also feel heart palpitations. Sometimes you can't relate joint pain or dental problems
Right,
or vision changes to menopause. And then hot flashes and night sweats and mood swings are the ones that's talked about the most.
right.
But when I tell you those are like child's play compared to the damage that menopause and perimenopause can actually do to the body, because I'll tell you the story about me when I was having heart palpitations. It started, around, perimenopause, and my heart was skipping a beat. I had PACs, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. And then I was like, "You know what? I'm drinking water, I may be doing too much caffeine or whatever the case may be," but come to find out it was a hormonal imbalance because low estrogen can also affect the heart. And it started during my perimenopausal years, but it got worse during menopause.
And that's interesting because you being someone who knows all about menopause, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Still, you were thinking, "Oh, well, maybe it's stress or maybe I'm drinking too much caffeine," right? Because uh, like you said, one day you can feel a certain way, the next day you feel another way, and so it is kinda difficult to pinpoint. I often tell people because 'cause I've heard so many women say, "I'm angry. Why didn't my mom tell me that this is how menopause was? Why didn't my grandma, my aunts, or, other women who've gone through it before me, why didn't they tell me that this is what it's like?" And the public health part of my brain truly believes that the menopause, the perimenopause, menopause we're going through right now, our generation, is not the same as what our mothers, grandmothers went through. And I really think that there's something to do with the chemicals that we ingest through eating, breathing, washing, just the chemicals that come into our bodies and affect and maybe they do something with the hormones, I don't know, but I will agree with you in saying that, like I said, I didn't have really bad, hot flashes. What was worse for me was my blood pressure spiked, my cholesterol spiked, my blood sugar spiked. I was doing nothing different as far as my eating or exercising or anything, nothing different, and all of a sudden, it's almost like overnight, I had to double my blood pressure medication. I was now pre-diabetic. Now my doctors are saying I might have to take cholesterol meds, and I'm just like, "What the heck is going on?" Right? I remember one time, this was like 2021, something like that. We're still going through COVID. And excuse me, I gotta get some water. Mm. So we were still going through COVID, and all of a sudden, my ears stopped up. It sounded like I was listening through water, right? And for a couple days, I just let it go because I felt like it would remedy itself, but it didn't. So a couple of weeks go by and I'm still having this issue. So I finally go to urgent care and I'm like, okay, is something going on? They look in my ears, they don't see anything. They send me home. After I paid a $75 copay for them to say nothing was wrong, they sent me
Exactly.
home.
Mhm.
And I still had this problem, my ears were stopped up, so a week goes by, I finally go to an ENT because 'cause I'm thinking maybe something else is going on. Go to the ENT, they do all these hearing tests where you hear the little beep and you raise your hand if you hear the beep on the left side, the right side, I did all of that, and they said, "Oh, you're fine, nothing's wrong, it must be stress." He literally said, "You're probably just stressed out and it should, alleviate after a while." And after a while, eventually, it did, right? It wasn't until, I started having other symptoms that were piling on top of each other and doing my own Google research that I found out that that is a possible symptom of menopause, of the decrease in your estrogen hormones or progesterone, I'm not sure which one. But you were saying how estrogen is all over the body and has 400 different jobs that it has to do, and I don't know what made it stop, but my ears were stopped up and that ear, nose, and throat specialist did not even think about that it could have been perimenopause for a woman of my age in my late 40s, 50s at the time, you would think that they would think to themselves, well, she's in her late 40s, she's 50 or whatever. This could be menopausal. They didn't even think about it, didn't even think about it. And that's the frustrating part. Other symptoms that I think catch people off guard is dizziness. I've heard
Mhm,
women talk about the imbalance. The dizziness starts in the inner ear. So maybe,
mhm,
there's
mhm,
something going on with the
mhm,
hormones in the inner ear.
Yeah.
Anxiety. I know for me, anxiety showed up at night, and I would just be in the bed crying uncontrollably, don't even know what I'm crying for. I would ask myself, "Why am I crying?" And I wouldn't even know why. I just felt a sense of doom, like
Mhm.
something was gonna happen. I didn't know what was gonna happen, it just felt like something was gonna happen and the weight of the world was on my shoulders, right? I've heard women talk about all of a sudden getting in their car and freaking out because they're scared to drive, having anxiety for driving. I've heard about that. And they don't understand why, because yesterday I was driving fine. Now all of a sudden I'm scared to drive. I've heard about women having very itchy skin, dry
Mhm.
skin in
Mhm.
places that they didn't have before. And then this really caught me off guard, Latalia. I tell you, I wish somebody had told me this because I did not know this part.
Uh-huh.
Body odor.
Uh-huh.
So I took a shower one morning, just like normal, went to work. And my job in sales, I drive a lot. So I'm sitting in my car driving for, let's say, an hour and a half to my
Mhm.
first appointment. Get out the car and I smell myself. And I'm like, what the hell? What is that? Right?
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
surely
Uh,
it's not me, you know?
uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
it was me. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is a one off. Maybe I didn't do something right this morning when I took my shower. It lasted for about 2 weeks, and I think on day 2, because I really did think the first day was a fluke. So the second day, it happened again, and I went to the grocery store and I bought that all over deodorant,
Mhm.
that you put all over your body. I had never, ever had to do that before, and every day I put it on, and then after about 2 weeks, it went away and I
Okay.
haven't had that problem again, but nobody told me that was a symptom of menopause, you know? When I go to the dentist now, they tell me if you have bleeding in your gums, you're menopausal, postmenopausal now, that can cause gum disease. You can have allergies with menopause. You definitely, I know a lot of women know about painful sex or vaginal
Mhm.
dryness
Mhm.
during that time too. Even if you're still having your period, even during those 10 years or so of perimenopause, sex can be painful and you can have vaginal dryness. And then the other thing that I think a lot of women, it catches us off guard, I know it did for me, was just sudden rage, just
Mhm.
angry at the world. And in our crazy world the way it is now, it's easy to chalk it up to the stressors of the world and not your hormone imbalances. But I'm here to tell you my tolerance for nonsense is gone. It is gone. And I remember women when I turned 40, I
Okay.
remember thinking, "Ooh, I feel so much like myself. I feel more, confident in who I am." And I remember women in their 50s saying, "Honey, you wait till you hit your 50s. You
Mhm.
really gonna feel confident then, and you really not gonna give a shit when you turn 50," And I couldn't
Yeah.
understand what that meant,
Mhm.
but I'll talk about that more in episode 3 when we get into actual menopause and postmenopause. But yeah, all of those quote unquote weird symptoms that we don't talk about much
Mhm.
is what caught me off guard. Did you have any symptoms that caught you off guard that even though you know a lot about menopause, is there anything that caught you off guard?
Well, Imma speak to also, like, the heart palpitations did because, it was right after Halloween, so I had all them little Snicker bars, so I was thinking, "Okay, it was just too much caffeine," and I think you don't wanna think to yourself sometimes you don't even connect the dots even as a healthcare professional, but when I was listening to your symptoms, now after studying menopause for so long, yours were like textbook because when you said the ears being stopped up, one thing that hormones do, it helps with fluid shifts. So estrogen actually is it makes you maintain fluid, but progesterone is a diuretic. So what happened with you is you probably had more higher estrogen levels as opposed to progesterone because you had the the hot flashes at night. No, you had the night sweats. Talking about the night
Right,
flashes.
right.
You had the night sweats. So that's more so you have low levels of progesterone as well. You had the anxiety. Progesterone is your nature's Xanax, so the calm. So your levels of progesterone was really, really low. You had the stuffed up ears, and when you don't have that fluid release from the progesterone, like, the diuretic effect, you can have fluid shifts in the body. So
Mhm.
now looking at your symptoms, I can see that you had an imbalance between your estrogen and testosterone. I mean, and progesterone. One thing too about testosterone, a lot of women don't talk about. They think it's just a male hormone, but testosterone is really key. It's not like a sharp drop in testosterone. It can start declining slowly in your late 20s or early 30s. And that's when some women lose confidence or lose their mojo or, their loss of libido. It's not as significant because you still have your other hormones on board. But when you start to gradually lose the rest of your hormones, you notice I don't have interest in sex anymore.
Right.
And this is when relationships suffer. A lot of people get divorced because men don't understand what's actually happening to your body,
Right.
what you're going through. And they're like, wait, my wife, is that my wife?
Right. Right.
And it's like, why is she snappy? Why is she not interested in me? And they take things personal. But it's just a transition period that we're even trying to figure out, like, what is actually going on?
Right.
Because even being a healthcare professional, sometimes the symptoms are so crazy. Like you can have burning tongue and have that's a perimenopausal symptom or
Oh,
menopause.
wow.
So you can have like allergies, like you said, with itching because it causes histamine to shift. And when people think about fluid shifts, they always think about the vagina. We have fluid everywhere in our body. So your
Mhm.
lungs can get stiffer, your eyes can get
Mm.
drier, your mouth can get drier. You lose fluid in different parts of your body and you start to develop those symptoms. Your skin, you can have more wrinkles in your skin because it affects the collagen, like your mood because it shifts to serotonin and dopamine. So, and your joints, it helps builds bone and break down bone. So when you don't have those hormones on board, things happen and you're trying to make sense. And then you go to the doctor's office and you're across from your provider, your doctor. Dr. Jones take out his pad and you're telling him your symptoms and he's writing this down, and when you walk out of the office, you got a prescription for Zoloft, for
Right.
depression, or a
Right.
prescription for, metoprolol for the hot flashes, or you refer to rheumatology for the, joint pain,
Right.
and you got insulin, resistance because estrogen helps with insulin sensitivity. Estrogen helps push sugar into the cell. So when people have type 2 diabetes, in the perimenopausal years, these are some clues, and you come out with, I was fine and sexy and hot, and now I'm pill popping every single day.
Right. Right.
Like what's going on? And then your relationship is suffering. So yeah, perimenopause is the beginning of that transition, and it's very important that you are aware what's going on with your body.
And that's why we call this particular episode the hot mess, because it's a hot mess. I mean, it's overwhelming, and not only are you going through all of these changes and you're trying to figure out what's going on, but guess what? You still gotta go to work. You still gotta take care of your family. If you're married, you still gotta be a wife, A lot of us are going through taking care of our aging parents on top of all of that, right? So you got all of these responsibilities on you on top of your body just going crazy all at the same time. I know for me, one of the things I fell a couple times. My balance is not as steady as it used to be. And it's scary. I started thinking, gosh, like even now, like if I wear heels, I am very careful. I pay attention. I look at my steps. I've misjudged sidewalks and almost, thank God I didn't hurt myself bad, but I twisted my ankle one time. I jammed my thumb because one time I fell and I tried to brace myself with the fall and I jammed my thumb. It took over 9 months for that to heal. I just, and this was, I'd say all of this was over like a 4 or 5 year period. It's not like it
Okay.
all happened all at the same time. It was happening gradually. So it was hard for me to put the pieces together and realize it was all connected. Right.
Well, mhm.
And the other thing that just, oh, it just hurts my heart so much. I cannot multitask like I used to. I cannot. My brain just does not work like it used to. Listen, when I had my first child, I have a vivid memory of breastfeeding her, holding her like a football, breastfeeding her. I was on the phone cooking.
Mhm,
standing at
mhm,
the stove cooking.
mhm, mhm.
I couldn't do that now. I couldn't multitask like that now. I and if I don't write something down, it is gone, right?
Absolutely.
It's gone. And so, yeah, it has just disrupted. I'm in a new normal, and I've had to get used to this new normal, and it shook me, you know? And it did kinda make me sad because I'm not really the same woman that I used to be in a lot of ways, and I've had to shift. I've had to be more careful when I walk in heels. I've had to make sure that I write everything down so I don't forget it. Um, and it's just hard. It's just hard. But I was gonna ask you too, when we're talking about the symptoms of perimenopause, one of the most obvious ones is skipping periods.
Mhm, mhm.
So I want you to talk about that. What causes the skipping of periods? And a lot of women don't realize they can still get pregnant.
Right,
Well, there
right.
are babies that are conceived in the mid-40s, sometimes 50, and we used to call them oops babies. I like to
Mhm.
call them miracle babies, but,
Well,
so explain, why do we have the skip periods? What's going on there? And then also, how can we still get pregnant? If the eggs are of low quality, if they're not being released every month, how do
mhm.
some women still get pregnant?
Okay. So think about our life has been predictable, during our menstrual cycles. You even plan trips or romantic weekends around your menstrual cycle. You can write it in, exactly, you can prepare for it. It was like every 28 days, every 30 days, you knew when it was coming. During this transition period, your body really doesn't give you that many warnings that something is different, something is changing. So, but like I said, not the estrogen, the eggs decrease in number. So, therefore, the signals for the hormones are weakened. And so, in order for you to to ovulate, you need progesterone, in ovulation. So some people still have cycles, but they may not ovulate. And that's why you have, irregular cycles. You might bleed twice in 1 month, or you might have 40 days where you have a period that'll come, 10 days and then 15 days. It's just irregular. It's just off. Or you might skip months where you will not bleed at all because your body is transitioning, because the hormone signal is different. So you still could get pregnant because some women still do, ovulate. They can
Mm,
ovulate if they're having a period. Some can definitely ovulate, and they're tests to see if you're still ovulating. So that's why it's important for you to track your trends to see what's actually going on. Because just because your signal is weakening doesn't mean that you don't have a signal at all. Doesn't mean that you don't have any good quality eggs. It could mean that the majority of your eggs might not be. Who knows? For me, the quality of my eggs were not that great. But for the next woman, she could have like 15,000 eggs, and her 15,000 eggs could all be of good quality. It's just that supply of her eggs have lessened.
mm,
So, and then she could still be ovulating, but she still could be going through that erratic phase where her estrogen is spiking or crashing or surging and things
mhm.
like that. So she'll have months where her period is not the same. So perimenopause is your body getting used to a transition that you're about to go into menopause, whether it's 8 years or 10 years. So it's the getting ready for. But see, no one gets you ready for perimenopause, and that's
Right.
and that's the thing. So you're used to tracking your symptoms, or you're used to having a period every 28 days, and then all of a sudden things become erratic, and you start having these off the wall symptoms, but you don't
Right.
put it together.
Right, and I know for me, it did help when I started writing down things that were going on and keeping track, which, a journal like this where you
Mhm,
can write down your symptoms every single week and talk about your feelings, how what you're eating might affect some things in your body, how stress may affect some things in your body. That way, when you go to the doctor, you'll be more equipped to say, listen, these are the patterns that I've seen over the last few months or whatever, instead of trying to remember. Because again, you may not be able to remember as well as you used to because of the brain fog, right? So
mhm.
rather than trying to remember all of that, it does help when you actually write it all down and keep track of it. Um, I wanna go back though, we were talking a little bit about relationships, and this is big. I have been divorced for a very long time. I was a single mom raising my girls on my own, but I have a lot of friends that are married. A number of those friends have gotten divorced, like you said, during this phase, during this time, and I believe there's several reasons for that, not just having to do around sex, and we'll talk about that more in the next episode when we actually talk about the menopause and postmenopause. But, when we're talking about sex, though, that is one of the most bothersome symptoms for a lot of women who had a happy sex life beforehand. And now all of a sudden, sex really, literally hurts. I've heard women say it felt like sandpaper, you
Mhm,
know. Um, I've heard women say, I just lay there and let him do it because I know he wants it and I don't want to hurt his feelings. And she's not getting anything out of it but pain, you know.
mhm.
And it's sad. I hate to hear stories like that. I hate to hear when women are suffering so much and they're trying to figure out what to do to make themselves feel better, to please their partner, to help their relationship overall. But I know it's difficult, and I know menopause didn't create the problem. It doesn't create problems in a relationship, but it can expose them. Can you help us understand why in those 8 to 10 years of perimenopause, what is it about the hormonal shifts that affects sexual pleasure for women?
Okay, for one, you lose testosterone, and testosterone helps with libido. You know, the wanting of libido, the desire to have sex, and then you lose moisture because you know your estrogen and your progesterone is imbalanced, so you lose moisture. So you have that vaginal dryness, so sex is not enjoyable. And also, too, women a lot of times don't know what's going on because I see women every single day. And, you know, and we talk about symptoms of anxiety or depression and things like that. And some people do not or just can't bring themselves to believe that it has something to do with perimenopause, you know,
Uh,
because it's not talked about enough or their doctor didn't say it, then they can't believe this is related to perimenopause. So they just feel that I'm going through something, I'm anxious, I'm going through a depression, so they can't explain it. And so if they can't explain how they're feeling, or if they can't explain their irritability or their loss of tolerance or their anxiety or they're crying at Hallmark commercials,
yeah,
then your husband is really lost. He's like, what happened to my wife? Why is she snappy? I can't do anything right. You know, every little thing pisses her off. But she can't explain it and neither can he, so you get confused and then you grow further and further apart. And that's very important. And when you go to the doctor and it's dismissed, because I want you to repeat what you said for the people in the back, Angela. What did you say about 80% of providers?
oh, so okay, so there's a study that the AARP did, and about 80% of internal medicine doctors did not get training on menopause and women's hormonal imbalance, right? That no training. And 80% now. So that means 80 out of 100 internal medicine doctors did not get trained on women's hormonal health. And then there's a large percentage of OBGYN residents that also feel that they didn't get enough training in it. I actually have a friend of mine that is a gynecologist. She recently went through menopause. And she and I were talking, and she said, Angie, nobody told me that it was going to be like this. She's a gynecologist.
Mhm.
And she said, it upset her so much as a woman, number one, that she didn't know what she was going to be going through, but also as a physician and a female, physician, a physician for women, an OBGYN, that she didn't know. So she went back and got certification in menopause, in women's hormonal health. She went back and got more education on it. And I think she's writing a book about it now because she wants women to be educated. It's frustrating because healthcare professionals don't even know. And the thing that makes me angry is they will not tell you that they don't know. They just treat your symptoms. So, like you said, if you come in and you say, I'm crying at night, it's uncontrollable. I don't even know why I'm crying. They may say, how's your stress? All of us are stressed.
Us.
I don't know anybody who's not stressed,
Mm, mm,
especially in today's society with everything that's going on. Um, so if you say, "Yes, I'm stressed," then they write you a prescription for an antidepressant. That's not you're treating one symptom out of probably 20, and you're not looking at the cause of the symptom, and it is so frustrating to me, and it's so disheartening, and that's why I want you and me to keep talking about all of these things that women are dealing with in and around perimenopause and menopause so that they can be better educated when they go talk to their doctor. They don't just say, "Yeah, I'm depressed." They can then say, "I'm depressed, but yeah, I also have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G.
Exactly.
And oh, by the way, I was listening to this podcast and I heard that estrogen levels don't just bottom out, they fluctuate. So we need to really pay attention to my estrogen levels." You can speak more empowered in a more empowered tone when you're talking to your physicians. And that's the thing that I want us to accomplish with this podcast and with the two companies that you and I created. But it's, I think the thing that really, I told you that the mental and the emotional were the things that really caught me off guard. It was also the psychological part
Mhm,
of it that
mhm,
caught me off guard. So much is happening to women during the time that they're going through perimenopause. A lot of us had children in our 20s. So by the time we're in our 40s, those children are going to college. We might now have an empty nest. And if we were married, now after 20 something years of raising children, we're looking at our spouse going, "Who are you?"
right.
Because we put all of our energy into our children and being a wife and work.
Careers.
And
Mhm,
now all of a sudden you're looking at someone across the table from you and you don't know who he is and you don't know who you are because you're going through some crazy stuff with perimenopause. It's also a time that you're probably very focused in your career. Maybe you've been promoted and you're working harder and longer hours. You might have some health scares now because we're getting older. All of those things, caring for your aging parents. Nowadays, even if you have grown kids, a lot of us, the grown kids come back home because of the economy,
mhm,
right? So we're dealing with all of this stuff and trying to figure out what's going on with our bodies. So it's a lot. And when you're looking at your relationships, then you start to say, does this friendship really serve me?
right.
Because I'm going through so much mentally and physically that now I'm in survival mode for myself. I'm not in survival mode for my family, my kids. It's for me because I got to take care of me. If I don't take care of me, nobody is. So I'm starting to reevaluate my friendships, my romantic relationships. Maybe I've been miserable in my marriage for years, but I kind of put up with it. And now I'm not willing to do that anymore.
Mhm,
Right. So all of those psychological changes start happening as well during perimenopause. And I know for me, I decided being single so long, all these years I was dating, trying to find my husband,
mhm, mhm,
hoping
mhm,
I was going to get married again. And I still have hope that one day I will. However, what has shifted for me is I'm not focused on that anymore. What I'm more focused on is just enjoying the rest of my life because going through all of these symptoms all at one time and feeling like I was losing my mind, it made me think, wow, Angela, how many more years do you have on this earth? I got less years ahead of me than I do behind me.
mhm,
I doubt
mhm.
very seriously, I'm 54 now. I doubt very seriously I'm going to live another 54 years, right?
Hey, you might, I mean, because you because you got hormone therapy, but also too, Angela, let me tell you, with the relationship piece too, is like when you go to the doctor and then you have all these symptoms and your spouse go with you because he's trying to figure out what's going on. And so
Mm.
when the 80% of providers don't know, then you hear what the doctor says, and the husband's like, "Oh, see, we got validation. See, I know you just crazy. Something you just crazy." So, so they
Mhm.
brush it off, and that doesn't make the relationship any better because no
Right,
one validated you. No one made you realize that your symptoms are real. No one else said that this is truly menopause. This is a transition or perimenopause. This is what happens, and let me help you get through this. So,
right.
just like hysterectomy, the reason why hysterectomy is called a hysterectomy because they should start taking, female parts out because they felt like women were in hysteria. because what all the stuff that was going on, with us. And then when you don't have a support of your physician because they haven't been trained in menopause, it can feel hopeless. And like
Right.
me being a nurse practitioner in this day and age, a lot of people feel like, well, you're not a doctor. Or you're not an OBGYN, that doesn't matter. I
Nope.
know this stuff.
That's right.
I've studied this, and I lived it. So,
Definitely.
so therefore when I try to tell you these are symptoms of menopause, so we're piling on pills and pills, this is not gonna work. I need some for sleep. We need to get your hormones checked. I need some for sleep. You gotta, I don't want you to suffer. And I'm here and I'm trying to educate you. But a lot of times people won't listen because they feel like, oh, you're not my doctor, or you're not in that
Mm.
particular field, or you really don't know what you're talking about. But we all
And
go,
that's sad
mhm,
because, in my experience, I remember the first time I had a nurse practitioner, I was in my early 20s, I was in grad school, and she was my gynecologist, for lack of a better word, but she was a nurse practitioner. She was the first person that educated me about my anatomy.
mhm, mhm,
She had a mirror and she showed me what my body looked like. I'd never had a doctor do that before.
right.
So
Mm.
she educated me more than any physician ever did, right? So I think it's sad when people don't realize that just because you don't have MD behind your name, then for some reason that you're not as knowledgeable about certain things. When because you are an expert in women's hormonal health, you know more than most OBGYNs, and a lot of ladies don't know that, and that's unfortunate. I just want women to know that it doesn't have to be a physician. It can be a nurse practitioner, a PA. Is there anybody else you can think of that can guide
Like
women?
DO, chiropractors even
Yeah.
learn, menopause and perimenopause symptoms, things like that. So it's basically who've studied the craft,
Right.
and just like so your background is amazing and you know a lot more, than a lot of providers and things like that, Angela. So just because someone doesn't have the MD behind their name or they're not your particular doctor doesn't necessarily mean they don't know what they're talking about, especially being a woman and being a Black woman
I know,
and
yeah.
experience this,
Yeah.
in some of the harshest forms, the anxiety. Because when you were talking about driving, I have, living in Atlanta, being on
Yeah,
285, and I'm like, "Why
that's
am
right.
I nervous?" You know?
That's right.
And so, you have the anxiety or even at night, anxiety used to be so bad that I would, like, just lay there and listen to my heartbeat, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So menopause and perimenopausal symptoms are real,
Mhm,
and you deserve to be heard. So, if
mhm.
someone has something to say, listen and follow the advice. Get your hormones checked. It's gonna doesn't cost you anything to get your hormones checked except, your insurance or anything like that, but it's not gonna bring you any suffering just to get
Right,
your
right,
hormone levels checked, just to
right,
see, is this could this be me? Am I
right.
going through perimenopause? Or talk to someone. I'm with the final floor of menopause and more, and I did write a wellness guide to talk about some of the symptoms and I broke it down, with chronic diseases and so to educate people so you can understand what's actually going on with your body. So definitely don't suffer in silence because there's a lot of us out here.
And I want women to know that we have resources available to them. There's a website that's the Menopause Society, and the website is www.menopause.org. And in the show notes, there's a lot of links for different resources for women. So that resource is in in one of those links. But if you go to that website, you can search by putting in your zip code, and it'll tell you what healthcare providers are in your area that have been specifically certified and have gone back to school to learn about menopause. And I encourage all the women I talk to, I tell them about that website, menopause.org, because you want to find someone that really knows what they're talking about. And unfortunately, some of the doctors that don't know what they're talking about aren't going to tell you they don't know what they're talking about. So we're going to wrap this episode up. The next episode is all about menopause. So we went from episode 1 being all the way back through, when you were born and your eggs when you were born and what causes puberty. And then now today's episodes, the episode 2 has been all about perimenopause. And then episode 3 will be about menopause and postmenopause. And from there, we're going to have episodes that are going to be all about brain fog. We might have an episode that's all about sex and how to help yourself feel better when you're having vaginal dryness and things like that. So each episode is going to focus on something that's relevant for those of you out there listening and that are going through this change of life. So if you are listening and you feel like, man, why am I snapping at the people I love? Or why does everything feel so much harder all of a sudden? And why don't I recognize myself? I feel like an alien in my own body. I hope this episode has helped you to understand why these things are happening. And hopefully, you now realize that you're not broken, you're not failing, you're not going crazy. Your body is just transitioning. So, if today made you realize that you probably should have been writing some of this stuff down and keeping track of it, listen, I get it. I went a while before I finally said, Angela, you need to write some of this stuff down and keep track of your symptoms and what's going on, so that when I go to the doctor, I can present it to the doctor. And if you feel the same way, it's never too late to start keeping track of your symptoms. And that's why Latalia and I put together something we call the Listener Starter Kit. The link is in the show notes. And it's nothing fancy, but it is some resources that you can use to help you keep track of your symptoms and organize your thoughts in a way that you can be more prepared for your doctor's appointment. It's in the link below and it's there if you need it, if you want it. Okay. Now, for the next episode, again, we're going to talk about menopause and it should make more sense to you now that you understand what happened during puberty and perimenopause, and then we're going to go right on into menopause. So, Latalia, is there anything you want women to remember from this particular episode? Anything you want them to take with them?
Just know, listen to your body. You are not crazy. It's so many of us has experienced some of the same symptoms that you're experiencing. Don't just feel that you're just getting old. It's always a reason for everything. So if you don't have the right provider, the right medical doctor that's not answering the questions that you need, there's others out here. We are here for you and we do not want you to suffer in silence. And continue to listen to all these episodes because even one day we're going to start taking questions and answering those questions for you.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. We are going to start taking questions too. So thank you everybody for spending time with us today. If this conversation helped you in any way, make sure you subscribe and you share this podcast with your friends. We all know women who are going through this. So share the podcast, share the knowledge with your friends and family that are going through this as well. Follow us on social media. The links are in the show notes and keep the conversation going with us on social media. And we will see you in the next episode. Take care.